Dynasty Corner!
What's up, Brainiacs? Welcome into another episode of the Fantasy Brains podcast. And today, we are going to be bringing you some post-draft NFL content. We're going to be talking about some rookie wide receivers, a lot of guys that got drafted in the first round and early second round of the NFL draft that landed in somewhat interesting situations, whether it's a crowded receiver room. We don't know whether or not they're going to be the 1A or the 1B or even the wide receiver 3, and just some interesting picks all around looking at the draft capital and prospect as a whole. Before we get started, make sure to follow us over on all of our social media accounts at Leatherbrains, and especially make sure to check out our YouTube channel, the Leatherbrains Podcast. Got a lot of great content going up there every single week. We got the Leatherbrains, the Tuesday show, also posting their episodes, so definitely make sure to check those out. Like I said, we're going to be talking about some wide receivers, and I am here today with my partner, as always, Charlie Chemers. Charlie, any words for the viewers before we get this going?
The NFL draft shakes up everything. I mean, we go in with some idea of kind of where the rookies are going to fall in terms of ranking and how we should view them in fantasy, what range they're going to get drafted in, but we never know exactly what team they're going to get drafted to. So now that we have these landing spots, we can come in and really get into the nitty gritty about these guys, talk about them, talk it through, see what they're going to bring at the next level within these specific landing spots, because each team is going to use their guys differently. And we want to know the best guys that are going to come out of these situations that they're in.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like you said, there's a lot of interesting landing spots. So let's start out with the top dog. This guy, Jags traded up from 5 to 2 to select Travis Hunter. They traded a first-round pick next year and a second-round pick this year. So they gave up a haul for him. Liam Cohen said that they're going to be primarily using him as a wide receiver. That's just, what he's saying right now. We don't know if there's any truth to it. So I can start here by saying I am a little concerned with just the idea of drafting Travis Hunter. He is a stud, and I think, to make this clear, I'm talking about in terms of leagues that only have wide receivers. If you have an IDP or, you can play a defensive back or anything like that, then what I'm saying does not matter, because if he can be used with defensive and offensive points, then he's going to be a cheat code in fantasy. But assuming you play in a very standard league that does not have any defensive positions, I'm just a little worried about Hunter in terms of the risk that's associated with him. I think that a player that you're going to be taking inside the top 5 picks potentially of your fantasy draft, whether that's standard or super flex, to get a player that you can't even confirm is going to play more than 50 to 75% of the offensive snaps is just a little concerning, along with the fact that he's going to be the number 2 receiver on this team to Brian Thomas Jr., who just had a terrific rookie season with, 70 to 80 catches, over 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns. So I just think the risk that's associated with Hunter is going to be a little bit too much for his early draft price.
That's definitely a certain outcome that could genuinely happen with Hunter's career. I mean, we don't know how things are going to go in his career. He could come out and somewhat disappoint at wide receiver, and they end up switching him to cornerback full time, which is where he primarily played in college. Obviously, he played both sides of the ball at a high snap percentage level, but he could end up making a transition to being more of a full-time cornerback in the NFL. But I do think that they're going to give him a chance to play wide receiver in the NFL first. I think it's a more highlighted position in the NFL. You've got the media, the cameras on you. Travis Hunter is an incredible individual. He's so skilled. I think that's what they want to do with him. Liam Cohen is coming in to procure this offense, and that's exactly what they're setting towards Travis Hunter to be a part of. Now, the question is, how much of that offense is he genuinely a part of? I know you're scared of those things, but at least in my eyes, when Liam Cohen comes out and says, we're going to use him as wide receiver, I'm going to trust that, at least right now. And I think that I can expect him to be out there on offense for roughly 75% of their snaps.
I agree. I think that's what you can assume right now. But is 75% of snaps as the wide receiver 2 on the offense worth a top 3 pick? Like that's where
I think so, because I genuinely think that he brings a next level skill set that is complementary to Brian Thomas. They're both going to be able to
True.
play their roles. And I see no reason why Trevor Lawrence cannot support two top 15 wide receivers in fantasy football. Now, we might see Brian Thomas at the higher end wide receiver one range of that, which we saw last season. We already know that they're capable of that. But
Mhm.
Travis Hunter's skill set, I think, paired with Brian Thomas and with Trevor Lawrence and with Liam Cohen in this offense, I don't see why Travis Hunter in his rookie year can't be a easily top 20 wide receiver, if not top 15, and then being able to play with Brian Thomas for the future of his career.
I just don't know if we can expect the Jags to produce 2 top 15 receivers, and I
Is
can't
Trevor
assume that
Lawrence
Hunter.
capable of it?
I think he is personally, but, like, I don't know if I can, like, bet on that because I think obviously having Lawrence is gonna really help this offense. You bring in Liam Cohen, who the Buccaneers last year threw, what, top 3 in the league with Baker Mayfield, so
Mhm.
you have a similar gunslinger type quarterback in T-Law. And so I think they're going to run a very similar type offense where it's going to be a lot of, Brian Thomas might play in that Mike Evans role where he can kind of do everything. And I don't want to say Hunter's going to play in the Godwin role, but I think he could be used all around, which is where I do like him because I think he could be played in the slot. And I think he also could be played on the outside. They got Parker
He's an animal.
Washington, who they've said a lot of good things about. They also still have Gabe Davis in the roster. They brought in Diami Brown as well to be a solid deep threat. So it's just hard for me to take a guy that high where it's like, even if I'm not high on McMillan, who I would say is the comparable receiver to Hunter, obviously in this range, it's just like the clear path that McMillan has to being a wide receiver one on the Panthers is just, it's tough to pass up on that when, at least in my eyes, I just can't see Hunter ever being the one. I could see it maybe being a 1A, 1B, but I just can't see him ever overtaking Thomas because I don't believe in him enough as a receiver. And that's more just credit to how good Thomas is.
Well, McMillan definitely, he has that top 10 draft capital too. So there's a higher floor associated with that.
Sure.
The higher you're drafted in the NFL draft, the more likely you are to produce at a higher end level and at least bring some fantasy production. And the thing with Travis Hunter is the most valuable thing because we don't ultimately know how they're going to perform. We never know what's going to happen and how it's going to shake out. But the most valuable thing within Travis Hunter's case is that he went second overall in the NFL draft as a wide receiver and the Jaguars traded up for it. Now, you can't argue with those facts. That's exactly what
I can
happened in the
argue with the
NFL
fact that
draft,
you're
and
saying he
if
was
it were a
drafted as a
different but
receiver.
if it were somebody else that wasn't named Travis Hunter, if it were Marvin Harrison Jr., if it were Jamar Chase that this happened to, it would be a completely different conversation, and that player would probably be going ahead of Ashton Genty in rookie drafts. And if Jamar Chase goes second overall or Marvin Harrison, you best believe they're at least in the same tier for sure. But
You're comparing Travis Hunter to Marvin Harrison and
no, I'm
Jamar.
saying I'm comparing the draft selection. I'm trying to open your mind to the idea that a guy that goes second overall needs to be considered as a premier fantasy option. Whether you like the player or not, whether you like the situation that they're in or not, this is an opportunity because he went second overall and because they traded up for him for Travis Hunter to be a premier fantasy football option. And because of that, he is going to get all the love in the world from Trevor Lawrence and Liam Cohen, even possibly beyond Brian Thomas at some point in his career.
Yeah, I mean, you said I can't argue with the facts. I will definitely argue that he was not drafted second overall as a receiver. He was drafted as a receiver and corner.
And then
So
they came
he
out and
was
said he's probably going to play mostly receiver.
true. Again, that's just hearsay. And again, he can play both. So it's like he was not drafted as a receiver. He's drafted as playing both
Yep.
sides of the ball, which is
That's true.
something that is unicorn behavior in the NFL and warrants being that good. So I am not going to personally put him at the level of those other players because he was drafted due to his defensive presence as well. And I just can't see a way that he'll ever be better than Brian Thomas Jr. I like Hunter as a receiver. I think he's a good player. I don't think he's a generational prospect, a receiver. I think he's a good prospect, but what I've seen out of Thomas in his rookie year, I would be shocked if Hunter ever touched that.
Thomas is proven. Thomas is a proven star wide receiver in the NFL, and Hunter hasn't proven that yet. No matter who you are as a rookie. You are still below all of the guys that have proven themselves, and I completely agree with you on that aspect. I wouldn't be taking Hunter over Brian Thomas in any redraft leagues or anything like that, because that would be insane. That would be utterly stupid to do. But in these rookie drafts, you're not drafting between Brian Thomas and Travis Hunter. You're drafting between Hunter and other rookies that also haven't proven themselves. And when that's on the line and when your push comes to shove, you've got to go with the guy that has that premier potential as a second overall pick, as a traded up prospect in the first round, as a wide receiver. These are all tangible things that we can talk about within Travis Hunter's profile that make him worthy of a second, third, or fourth overall selection in your rookie drafts.
No, I think he's worthy of going very high. There's just like, I will say this, and I think you'd agree with me on this, that if you are in a position where your team is very weak and that you don't have a lot of depth, I would not take Hunter because he is a really risky play, because there is a chance that he plays corner more of the time if he doesn't work out as much at
All rookies can
receiver.
be risky.
Nah, but it's different though, because you don't even know if he's going to end up playing the offensive side of the ball. You don't know. I don't care
You
what
have to
Liam
just
Cohen
trust that,
said.
though. Oh, I
But
mean,
okay,
but you
okay.
don't know what any
Trust,
rookie's going to do. A
trust
lot of rookies
that.
don't get on the field right away. Matthew Golden might not be named a starting wide receiver for the Green Bay Packers because they have so many options. Egbuka is probably not going to be named a starting wide receiver. That's almost certain coming out
No,
of
but I
the
know that
NFL
those
draft.
guys are going to be receivers for their entire career. That's
You
what I do
can't
know.
knock Hunter for having an extra ability. Like, that's the thing, is you're trying to
No, no,
take
no,
him
no.
down because he could also play defense.
It's not an extra ability. It's the ability on the same level. And the thing is that you could take Hunter, and then 2 years from now he's playing 40% of snaps on offense and 80% on defense, and now all of a sudden you have a great real life player who isn't that valuable in fantasy, and you just drafted him in the top 4. And like I started this with like 2 minutes ago, if you are in a spot where your team is weak with depth, I would just personally either trade out, or I would take McMillan, or I would take Henderson or Judkins or any of those players in that range where you're at least getting a true offensive player, because no matter what you say, you can believe in Hunter, but he could play defense. I think he's a better defensive player personally.
See, I'm trying to say the likelihood, though, of him playing defense full time, like if of him transitioning away from wide receiver towards defense, the likelihood of that, I'm saying, is very similar to the likelihood that Tedero and McMillan were to not be a valuable wide receiver one for the Panthers. I would say that he might be a wide receiver 2 or 3 for them as likelihood as Hunter switching over. Now, we could see both of them explode. We could see easily Tetaroa be the wide receiver 1 for the Panthers. I mean, he's put in that role right now. He has every opportunity to be that, but that's the exact same thing as Travis Hunter, where he has every opportunity to be a star-studded wide receiver 2 for Liam Cohen's offense.
Yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of risk. I even if he plays 50% of the snaps on offense, he's not worth that pick.
Of
That's
course
just
not. Of course not. But that is I mean, I think the likelihood of that is, at least right now, looking low compared to
there's
other
definitely a
rookies.
there's definitely a higher chance than you're giving it, at least in my eyes. If I were to put it at a percentage, I'd still give it like a 30% chance, which is a little bit too high of a chance for me to be willing to take him over other premier prospects. I agree, he's
Why
in
can't
that
he
range.
go both ways? Why can't he play 75% on both sides of the ball, if
He
not more?
could. He could, but you know what that also will increase? His risk of injury. It's tough. It's gonna be tough. It's not an easy thing to play both sides of the ball and play them both at an elite level. So that's why there is a chance that he could be a unicorn and be insane. But again, there is a lot of risk associated with him as
Passing,
opposed to
we take
other
risks in
players.
fantasy football. Passing on Travis Hunter and him being really good is so much more embarrassing than selecting him and him ending up playing 45-50% on offense.
I mean, yeah, it might be less embarrassing, but at the end of the day, I don't really care how embarrassed
Yeah,
I
we're
am.
trying to win championships. You're right.
If my pick sucks, my pick sucks. Like at the end of the day, that's all I really care about. But let's get on to our next guy here. Emeka Egbuka gets drafted as the second wide receiver off the board to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This was a shocking pick, as they already have Evans.
Mhm.
They got Godwin, who just re-signed to a 3-year deal, and they got Jalen McMillan, who had a breakout towards the end of the year last year in his rookie season. So I love Egbuka as a player. A lot of reports out of Ohio State came out just how great of a guy he is off the field, his leadership. He was one of the main guys that was able to get a lot of those Ohio State seniors to come back, where they eventually won the national championship. He's a slot receiver, which is great for fantasy. He is, he has good speed, runs in the 4.4s. I think he's arguably the safest fantasy player in this entire draft, besides maybe Genty. So as a prospect, I love
What
him,
are you
but
getting out of that, though?
it's just like, yeah, I don't know. I'm curious what your take is on the situation, because there was also a report that came out that said the Bucks don't want to rush Godwin back. And so that makes me think that Godwin might have had a little bit of a setback on his injury.
Yeah, there's always been a little bit of worry with Godwin. We saw that he got paid over the offseason, and because of that, a lot of the dynasty community gave him the go ahead of, hey, he's probably healthy because he got that deal. Now, looking back on that, that was probably too early of an assumption to make. And we don't really know Godwin's status, and especially long term, I think is what the Bucks kind of decided with this. Now, they don't want to rush him back because they want Godwin to play out the full 3-year deal that he was given. But if Godwin ends up, you know, getting re-injured again because he's dealt with injuries throughout his whole career, that's why they need to have Egbuka in the background ready to step up. And Egbuka's the perfect guy to have for that because he is the most pro-ready wide receiver already. I mean, you could put him on the field tomorrow and he's going to bring you some production. Now, the question is, how high is his upside? How high is the ceiling for Emeka Egbuka? And at least right now, it doesn't seem very high. If he were a full-time starter, it still might not be that high.
Yeah, it's just like you're just betting on the talent. It's really tough that Godwin's still there. It would have been so much easier if he just signed with New England and he ends up in a great
Mhm.
situation there, and Ibuka can come in and just take over the slot role and fit in perfectly, and McMillan can still be relevant. But of course, nothing is easy in
Yeah.
fantasy football, so it didn't work out that way. But I think just again, similar to the Hunter play, it's you really got to look at the team situation of your fantasy team. I think that if you're looking to compete right now, I don't think Ibuka is the guy for you. Although I
Right.
will say, like we're talking about, Godwin could be out for the first 4 to 5 weeks of the season, and then Ibuka plays, in the slot, and then it'll be the interesting scenario where Ibuka's great for the first couple weeks of the season, and then Godwin comes back, and it's like, oh, like what did the Bucks kind of do? Like who runs in the
Right.
slot? Who's
I
getting
think
those
that speaks
snaps?
well to where he could be a value, where Egbuka might honestly be a value in redraft formats where you're at the end of these 1-year redraft leagues and you see Egbuka, a first-round wide receiver, still on the board out in we don't know where he's gonna go, but you might be in the 12th, 13th, 14th round, and Egbuka
Right.
might be there, and that looks super enticing because one injury, even though he's backlogged on the depth chart right now, one injury and Egbuka could just light up like that. And then in the dynasty format, we might be kind of seeing the opposite, where we might be seeing people are like, yeah, I know he's not going to be able to do that well this year, but I'm still going to take him early in dynasty formats under the assumption that I trust he's going to hit in the NFL and I trust that eventually he'll bring me some fantasy production. And in that case, you might want to fall back instead and go for other prospects.
I think he's definitely a good play for a team that has a lot of value and they can afford to take a player that's really good, but that they don't need to play for them year one. But again, if you're looking for that guy who's going to start for you year one, like Abuka could be that guy for the first couple of weeks, but there's a good chance that Godwin comes back or is even ready by week one. And then Abuka is not very relevant for this year. Even if he is the wide receiver 3, it's like you're feeding Evans, Godwin, McMillan's still going to probably get some snaps. You got the running backs as well. So it's a
Yeah.
lot of mouth to feed. And Liam Cohen left. So we don't even know what this offense is going to look like anymore. I assume they're going to be doing a lot of similar things, but we have no clue what that offense is going to look like this year. It changed a lot from 2 years ago to last year before Liam Cohen came in. So
Mhm.
I think there's just a lot of question marks with that Tampa offense. Me and you talked about it. It's like in 2 years, let's say when Godwin is potentially off the team or Evans is off the team and Abuka can really step up, who knows if Baker Mayfield is even there? And it's like, then what if the offense is completely changed? So there's just a lot of question marks with him. It's more of just like, do you buy the talent? And I think you do. I think you do.
I think you buy the talent, but the problem is still the ceiling for me at least because I mean I could see Egbuka going out there and dominate in the slot and get a ton of catches eventually, but it just seems like he's going to lack on the explosiveness. I don't think you're gonna see Egbuka put up a season with more than 5 touchdowns for maybe his entire first rookie contract. It's going to be
Oh,
it's
no way.
dude, with Cade Otton there, I mean, they have a lot of options. Mike Evans is the best red zone target in potentially the whole NFL. Like, I would be very, very shocked if Egbuka scores more than 5 touchdowns in his first 2 years of the NFL at least. But we'll see with that. And I liked what you were talking about with teams that need immediate production. You want to look towards, the RJ Harvey, the Caleb Johnson, these guys that if you just won your fantasy league or you're in you finish second or third and you're looking for that one thing to get you over the hump, those are the risks you need to take. The RJ Harvey, the guy that's a little bit older as a prospect but might come into Denver and just explode for a couple years and then fade off into existence. Whereas Egbuka, you're drafting to ride out with him for a year or two, and then you're hoping that he becomes a mainstay wide
Yeah.
receiver two. Like, he could just be your wide receiver two in fantasy for 4, 5, 6 years, which could be really, really valuable.
I mean, yeah, in my eyes, he's the same player as like JSN for the most part. Like, he's going to play a very similar role to what JSN does in Seattle, where he's just going to be like extremely reliable. He's going to be durable. He's not going to be crazy explosive, but he can make plays. And so I think he's going to have a very similar presence. It's just tough because I just don't know where they're going to use him. There's just question marks about the situation, but the talent is there. And I do like the fact that they have a gunslinger at quarterback. And at the end of the day, having reliable targets is good. And the thing is, Mike Evans is so reliable and Godwin is reliable too. So it's not like they don't have reliability in that offense, but I like Abuka, and I think that you have to bet on his talent long term and that he's a good pick towards the end of the first round in rookie drafts. But I don't think you can be faulted if you go other guys in that range. Like, I don't think you can confidently say that he's a surefire pick at any point. Would you agree with
Yeah,
that?
I mean, I think he is. Yeah, I think he's a surer bet than the other wide receivers that we're going to talk about today, especially in Luther Burden and Matthew Golden. And these are all crowded wide receiver rooms that we're talking about. These are polarizing spots that could go either way because it might genuinely take some time. And even though the upside is clearly not as high as a Matthew Golden prospect or a Luther Burden, who are electrifying players that, if they were handed the number one job, could easily outproduce a Emeka Egbuka. But Egbuka is much surer of a bet to supplant himself as a wide receiver two for a team and be a consistent option for your fantasy lineups, where Luther Burden and Matthew Golden, we might not see them even put up any fantasy valuable production. Now, they have high upside, but they could easily fall off and not be their team's 1, 2, 3, or 4 option.
Okay, so let's talk about Golden then, who gets drafted 23rd to the Packers. They finally take a receiver in the first round for the first time
So
in
exciting.
a million years. And of course, he's wearing a awful number in number 22. Like,
No, that's the best number.
that genuinely does bother me so much that he is
You're
a
a loser.
receiver wearing that number. I just cannot believe that. Like, watching him play is going to be painful. Not only just as a Bears fan, but also
No.
just seeing a receiver of that caliber wearing that number is very disappointing. But aside from that, he gets the best landing spot out of these receivers in terms of being able to come in as a wide receiver one. I really like this draft pick for Jaden Reed as well, because now Reed can stay in his spot in the
Mhm.
slot, and then Golden can come on the outside, most likely on the opposite of Romeo Dobbs. I think Watson clearly is the odd man out. He already, tore his ACL last year and not going to be ready for the season. So now they bring in another speedster in Golden, who ran a 4.29, and he can be that premier receiver in this offense. I think Jordan Love had a pretty bad year last year in comparison to what people were expecting out of him. And I think that he is due for a pretty big bounce back. The Packers are a team that like to run the ball a lot, but if Golden can, suffice himself as the wide receiver one in this offense, he had a pretty early breakout age. And, I think he can be a good receiver at every single level of the field.
I love it too. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if we ended up getting Matthew Golden at number 10th overall in the Creator League, because it does really seem like the dynasty community is lower on a Matthew Golden because of this idea that Green Bay is a crowded wide receiver room. And sure, there's a lot of wide receivers there, but we can go through them, and it's, Dontavian Wicks, Romeo Dobbs, Christian Watson, who is extremely injured and probably not going to play for the majority of next season. We've got Jaden Reed, who's there. And yeah, that's 4 guys. That's 4 receivers, and Matthew Golden is currently the 5th potentially in your eyes. But he was picked as a first-round pick for the Green Bay Packers. This is the Packers and LaFleur planting their flag, saying Jordan Love is our quarterback of the future. He's our next Hall of Fame quarterback, whatever the Packers want to believe. This is going to be his wide receiver. This is his Jordy Nelson, his James Jones, his Devontae Adams. They know when they see their guy and when they can go and get their wide receiver 1 for the future. And Matthew Golden might genuinely be able to supplant all those other wide receivers quite quickly and be this consistent number 1 option for Jordan Love. And if that is the case, Matthew Golden is a crazy value. He will bring so much fantasy production. It will be unbelievable. And I'm very, very excited for that. It's a risk that I am willing to bet on in a lot of fantasy drafts when he becomes a value.
Right. Like I did the film breakdown on him, and I thought he was a great prospect when I watched him. I mean, there's definitely a little bit of a question mark with the production that he had over his college career. But when you watch him on film, he runs routes very crisp. He has a really good release point. He has a really good catch to break in terms of, how fast he gets into his after the catch ability after, the ball is securely in his hands. And so I think that he can bring a Stefan Diggs level of presence if he can hit his peak and hit his ceiling in the NFL. And I think that just the opportunity to be in an elite offense with an elite offensive mind with Matt LaFleur is just really powerful. Green Bay has obviously had a lot of great receivers. They had Devontae. You mentioned Jordy Nelson, James Jones and Donald Driver before that. Like Green Bay having an elite wide receiver 1 as part of their culture. And clearly they are investing in one by finally taking one in the first round, which means they really did like him a lot as a player. So I just like Golden the most out of, kind of these guys outside of Hunter, obviously, in that
Me too.
second tier of players where you're looking at, Golden and Egbuka and Burden and the tight ends and some of the, lower tier running backs because of the ability for him to be a downfield threat, but also to catch screen passes and be involved in the short game.
Yeah, they're going to totally use him if he is the prospect that we saw him to be. And I think a lot of people are somewhat disappointed, honestly, in both the landing spot and his draft capital. Because a lot of people were talking about, oh, he should go to the Cowboys 12th overall, or
Right.
he's going to go earlier in the first round. And that, first off, came out of almost nowhere after the combine because he was not viewed as a first round prospect until he really ran really fast and people started getting on his side. But this idea of disappointment needs to be pushed, thrown away, get rid of that garbage and focus. We need to reevaluate and focus on what we were given. And what we were given is awesome. Like, his opportunity with the Green Bay Packers going in the first round has potential to be a wide receiver 1. Definitely a wide receiver 1 if he is able to go out there and be a incredible NFL prospect. I mean, we will have to see with him because who knows how he will actually perform and if he'll be able to supplant the other wide receivers. But I'm going to bet on that risk and take the chance that Matthew Golden could be a supreme option.
Right. I mean, I don't know how you can be upset with the landing spot
Yeah,
that he has a legit chance to be a wide receiver 1 in a great
they don't have
offense.
a wide
And
receiver 1. They do not have
and
a
he went
dominant
in the
guy.
first round. I don't really, obviously there is a premium like McMillan and Hunter going in the top 10, but it's like if you're going in the first round, you're going in the first round
Mhm.
because there's the 5th-year option on those guys too. So it's the first round guys, they get paid the most, they have the most years on them on their contract. So there's a lot riding on that. But
Right. I mean, when you
I
compare Egbuka's spot where he has Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Jalen McMillan technically ahead of him right now. Egbuka might jump McMillan right away, but those 3 guys might all genuinely be better than any wide receiver on the Green Bay Packers
Yep.
currently. I mean, Jaden Reed is a
Mhm.
really good guy, but Jaden Reed is not going to stand in Matthew Golden's way because he's more of a gadget type of guy out of
Yeah.
the slot and things. So that's all wheels up, you know? Let's go, Matthew Golden. Let's see what you can do now.
Reed is a role player. At the end of the day, he has his plays that he's really good at and things that he can do, but he's not the guy that you're going to be able to rely on a third down, out of system plays. That's where Golden can be Jordan Love's guy long term. But let's get on to our next receiver here. And we're on to the second round now, and that's Jaden Higgins, who goes very high in this draft. He goes with to the Houston Texans with the 34th overall pick. And I'm just going to be so straight up. I hate this pick. I hate it for the Texans because, one, their O-line was so awful last year. And you have CJ Stroud, who, was getting pressured at a rate of like 45% on majority of his dropbacks, I think, out of a standard pass formation. And you decide to take two receivers in round 2 and 3, both from Iowa State. And I like Higgins as a player. I think he could be a very solid real life option where he'll catch a lot of touchdowns and he'll be a really solid secondary outside receiver across the field from Collins and take some pressure off that side of the field. But I just think there's way too many mouths to feed on this offense. Collins is going to be the alpha dog in this offense as the 1A. They're going to want to establish the run. You have Tank Dell, who's not going to be there this year, but he'll be back next year. You got Christian Kirk, who they just traded for. You also bring in Jalen Noel, who is Higgins' teammate and who a lot of people would argue is better than Higgins. I know Higgins went before him, but there's just too many mouths to feed where it's like I think that Higgins will be better in real life than he will be in fantasy. It's just too low of a ceiling for me to want to take him high.
My initial reaction was definitely, ugh, like it because when teams take 2 wide receivers like back to back, second and third rounds and stuff, it gives me an idea, like it sends this idea that they don't have confidence in really like either one of them to be a focal point of their offense.
Mhm.
And they kind of just want to like help out their bets, and see like, oh, if we draft 2, like one of them will hopefully hit if Jalen Noel is actually the better. Like they couldn't decide who the better Iowa State wide receiver was. Come on, Texans. Like you have better process than that, and you can figure out who the better wide receiver is and which one you want to target. But they drafted Higgins first, and they took him at the second round, at the second pick of the second round. And that is really good draft capital. That's where we've seen T. Higgins go in the past. I mean, other guys like Xavier
Lad McConkey.
around there, but Lad McConkey was right up there. So it goes either way, but it's really good draft capital. It is telling towards you have an opportunity and he's going to be given an opportunity. And this is what I'm kind of coming around to with the Houston Texans, where they have CJ Stroud and they had a lot of offensive issues last year. And I think they're going to see some positive regression. CJ Stroud is going to see some positive regression in the passing game. And Nico Collins doesn't necessarily have to do it all. And we've seen them use multiple wide receivers. And even though Jaden Higgins might not be a star, I think he's going to bring some consistent fantasy output in terms of touchdowns, especially. You're not going to see him get a ton of targets because Jalen Noel is also going to be there, but we don't really know what this wide receiver room is going to shake up to be. I mean, it could end up going a lot of different ways, and I think that I'm going to be placing my bets on the guy with the higher draft capital who's playing on the outside along with Nico Collins. They like him. They liked how he profiles similarly to Nico Collins. So I'm going to be seeing what he can really bring to the table. And I think I'm going to still be drafting him at the top of his tier in Dynasty, where he's going with guys like Kyle Williams, who goes in the third round to the Patriots, Trey Harris, who goes in the second round later to the Chargers, and Jack Besh, who goes in the second round to the Raiders. Now, all those guys might have faster opportunity towards a number 1 or number 2 role, but I think that it's okay to bet on the talent in Jaden Higgins, the draft capital, and see in this ambiguous wide receiver core where the targets really end up going.
I like the draft capital, and that'll carry him a lot. And I think he does. He has a legit chance to be the other outside receiver from Nico Collins from day one. There is nobody else right now that's out there. You have Christian Kirk and Jalen Noel that'll be competing for the slot spot, but the other outside spot is wide open. I assume Higgins is going to be starting there from day one, so I'm not even worried about that. It's just like if you're taking Higgins, you're just betting that Stroud is going to be passing for 4,000 plus yards every single season and that he's going to be able to suffice. Again, passing to Collins as the 1A. Stroud also loves his tight end. You have Cade Stover, Dalton Schultz on the roster, who, even if they're not that great, they're still going to get targets just because they're on the field. He's going to target the running back as well. And then the slot is also always going to get targets. We talked about Jalen Noel, Christian Kirk. Like, there's just so many mouths to feed. And if you're not the number 1 outside receiver, it's really tough. Like, his ceiling would have to be like what T. Higgins is on the Bengals, who has a lot of value right now because of how good the Bengals offense was last year.
I don't even think his ceiling's that high. I mean,
Well,
we're
that's
talking
what I was
about
gonna
second
say.
round. We're talking about second round dynasty rookies. Like in drafts, we're talking about second round guys. The hit rate is very low. I see it as a total possibility that most of these guys that we're talking about don't even hit, don't even produce for that much for fantasy. And because of that, I think I'm just more confident in the talent of Jaden Higgins that I'm going to be taking him over the likes of those other guys because we haven't seen it from anyone yet. And then when push comes to shove, when you're there in the draft and it's, this guy has this question mark and this guy has that question mark and who knows who's going to hit. I think you have to, like, they took him in the second pick of the second round. That's definitely telling.
What's his ceiling in a given season? And his
His
best
ceiling
season.
is a worse T Higgins, but I think his ceiling is like he could score.
So
He
his
could
ceiling is like a top 20 to
No,
25
because T
receiver.
Higgins points per game. T Higgins is like almost top 5. He was crazy last year in points per game. And I think that we could see from Higgins. It's kind of funny how we're talking about two Higgins right now. That's got to be confusing for the listeners right now. But good thing we were talking about the first names. But I think that shoot, now I lost his name. Jaden Higgins. So I think Jaden Higgins' ceiling for his rookie year is we'll see what happens with that. Down
No,
the
his
line,
peak
his
year,
ceiling,
his
his
peak
peak
year.
season, I think we could be seeing 8 to 10 touchdowns from Jaden Higgins, and we could be seeing 950 to 1,100 yards in a season from Jaden Higgins on a lower amount of catches, probably. So, maybe he's in the 70 catch range or so with that kind of
Yeah.
statistics. But I mean that's still a high end wide receiver 2 season.
No, he has a high floor. I agree with that as a player because he is talented and he has a pretty looks like a surefire role as the other outside receiver. But I think if you're looking at some of those other guys that you mentioned and who you could get in the second round at the top of the second round in these rookie drafts, his ceiling is lower than all those other guys, in my opinion.
Yeah. Oh, his ceiling is definitely lower than those other guys.
And
And
that, but you're saying that
that
it's a
also
low hit rate, so you're going for upside with those. You got to go for
No,
upside with
I
those
mean, that
picks.
also has to do with just the kind of style of play that Higgins has. And I'm saying they all have low hit rates, but Jaden Higgins probably has the highest hit rate because like we said, he has a higher floor than those other guys. Those other guys, Kyle Williams has a ceiling through the roof right now because he can catch deep balls, he can do everything on the field, and he's with Drake May now as potentially his future wide receiver 1 when Stephon Diggs is out the door. But like that's wheels up too. And then Trey Harris is also playing outside wide receiver as a complement to Ladd and in Los Angeles. But I think that what Jaden Higgins brings to the table with his floor being, I think Jaden Higgins can consistently bring you, 700 yards and 6 touchdowns, whereas those other guys, we might not even see them eventually hit the field because they're just not as good as prospects potentially.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. I think with Higgins, it's gonna be a road that you're gonna see a lot of inconsistency on a week to week basis
That's for
because
sure. But
because
you're
of the
going to see
miles.
that from all of these guys.
Sure. That's very fair. But let's move on to our last guy of the episode here. He's a Chicago Bear, my wide receiver
Ooh,
1 in this draft, Luther Burden III. He is just an electrifying player. I truly believe, true
he's
talent
fun.
wise, he is the best player in this class in receivers, including Travis Hunter as a receiver. I think that Burden is just a terrific player, and he's going to play out of the slot for Chicago. I think the really underrated piece that could happen is that he does play in a Jahmyr Gibbs like role where that's how Ben Johnson designs this offense, where he is that kind of gadget electrifying player that you can use all over. And I think that's where he's going to really utilize Burden. I think that, obviously this is terrible for Romo Dunze, who was drafted extremely high in drafts last year. And now he's looking as the number 2 receiver on the outside, and then Burden comes into the slot and could potentially overtake him along with the draft pick of Loveland. But similar to Egbuka, it's just going to be such a crowded room in Chicago with Moore, Ano Dunze, and Colston Loveland. And, you're obviously going to be running the ball as well. So obviously the ceiling, in my opinion, is through the roof because in a couple of years, Burden could be the wide receiver 1 in this offense. And if Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams work out, you could be looking at a extremely talented player that's with an extremely talented coach and quarterback potentially. So I think ceiling wise, he has the highest ceiling out of like anybody, but it just could be a really bumpy road to getting there.
Yeah, his film jumps off the tape. When you watch it, like, he is a really fun guy to watch where he can do a lot with a little. And so the way that I kind of see him fitting in this lineup is he's going to allow DJ Moore to work down the field more. And I think that Luther Burden can take over a lot more of that shallow stuff that DJ Moore was asked to do.
For sure.
And so when you put him on that shallow area, getting him as many touches as possible, because you want to just manufacture touches to a guy like
Yep.
Luther Burden so that he can go out there and do whatever. Then you can put DJ Moore working down the field, running his double moves. You've got Romo Dunze, who can also still run routes and go over the top. And then Colson Loveland, who is a little bit more of a downfield threat as a tight end. So it is really interesting to see how Luther Burden can fit into this team, and he definitely will fit into this team, but it might take some time to earn out that shallow role because right now DJ Moore owns the offense. He runs that shit as the wide receiver one. He's going to get the ball, he's going to demand the ball, and that's just the kind of style that they have to run, at least at this moment. Now, when Luther Burden carves out a role, he's going to be able to earn those shallow plays. He's going to be able to get more and more touches as the season progresses. It's just a matter of, to me, how much is Romo Dunze and Colston Loveland going to eat? You know, that's really the question, because I don't see Luther Burden taking away from DJ Moore. I see him taking away from Loveland and Romo Dunze.
Right. I'm fully with you on it. I think Moore has his manufactured touches as well. Like he's still going to get screen passes thrown to him and he'll have those deep shots as well. And I think you are underrating Burden's ability to take the top off, because if anything, he's going to be the fastest guy in this offense out of the receivers. And I think you're going to see a lot of slot fades from him, which is a route that he was
That'd be
really
cool.
successful with at Missouri. And a lot of the time he was just overthrown by Brady Cook. But I
So
just,
what do you
yeah,
see the
go ahead.
target share going as for, let's go, give me the first, like, definitely the first year, but go as far as you can. First year,
Okay.
second year, third year.
Okay.
How do we see this target share going between all four guys?
I think it's going to be extremely even. I think it'll be year one. I think we could look at like DJ Moore having 20. I think Rome and Burden both around like 15 each, maybe Burden a little bit higher. I think Loveland like slash Komet like another 15. And then the running back comes in with probably like 5 to 10. Like I think it's going to be
Mhm.
very, very balanced, especially with what I saw in Detroit, where you saw consistently a lot of different guys eating every single game. And so I think that Ben Johnson's going to switch it up every week, get different guys involved. I think next year, depending on how these roles come out, I think Burden is the one. All those other guys kind of stay the same. I think obviously, Komet is going to most likely be off the team at that point, and Loveland's going to be the full guy, and his target share will be around the 15 to 18% in this offense. But I think Burden easily has a chance to get into the 20 range, just because of the manufactured touches that you talked about. He'll get lined up in the backfield. He'll get lined up for jet sweeps out of the slot. Lot of good play action ability with him. I just think he's an electrifying player, and he's going to be something that the Bears didn't really have last year, with just guys that can really make huge plays. Like we really only had DJ Moore, who wasn't even really able to do that last year. And so I think that I'm excited to see what Burden can do. And I think similar to Egbuka, you're betting on the talent with him. And you're betting that in 2 years that Caleb Williams is going to be, a great passer of the football, and that he's going to be throwing for around 4,000 yards a season, and that they're going to be throwing for a lot of touchdowns. Because if Caleb Williams doesn't turn out, then these guys aren't going to be able to get fed. At least like
He
maybe one
better.
guy will.
He better. They just used three, what feels like three first round picks on guys that can help him out, you know?
Yeah, no, and it's like it's a little annoying, because now it's like looking back, I wish that we used it's I always have, but it's like I wish that we used that Rome pick on a defensive end, or an offensive tackle or something like that. It's like our offense still with Moore and Burden and Loveland and Komet would still be great. But I think it's just there's a lot of mouths to feed, and it's a similar pick where you might have to wait a little bit with him. But I think different than Abuka, Burden actually has the ability to come in from day one and secure that slot role long term. Whereas Abuka is going to have to fight with Godwin, who's a top tier slot receiver for that spot, which is a little bit more concerning, because it's not even about how good Abuka is. It's about really how good Godwin can be post injury.
Yeah, I just think when Egbuka gets on the field, he's gonna get a target share a lot higher than Luther Burden. I would say, I know you're pretty high on that, but I would see that Luther Burden probably ends the season around 10, 11, 12% target share, at least in his first year. And then we see DJ Moore up towards 21, 22. Romo Dunze, 14, 15, like you were talking about. And then Colston Loveland and Cole Kmet this year, I think would share, 18, 19 between the two of them.
I
So,
just can't see that. Like, let's say Caleb's throwing the ball like
I mean,
30
if
to
you
35 times. I can't see Burden only getting 3 targets on this offense. Like, I just can't see that happening. There's no way that it's that low. Like, I don't think
well,
I don't even think Rome's target share will be higher come the end of the
I
year.
mean, I just think it takes some time. Like I agree when he's a full-time player. Like I think Burden at the end of the season could be seeing 5, 6 targets. But at the beginning of the season, I mean, he might go week 1 with 1 target. Week 2
He
might
could,
be
but I just
1
think
target.
he's
So,
very NFL ready. Like he had a
uh,
crazy early breakout age in college. He broke out very early, which is a very,
but he
telltale
also
sign.
regressed. His 2023 season was a lot better than 2024,
Correct.
and that's if you go watch his 2023, you're like, this is a guy that needs to go top 15 in the NFL draft. But he regressed a little bit, and we have to figure out kind of what happened. There were a lot of different possibilities. I mean, his quarterback was a big issue in 2024, but we will have to see how he fits
Right.
into the Bears offense. I agree that he's going to fit in perfectly as a slot wide receiver. I just don't know how much value that's going to be brought to you immediately out the gate. And it might take some time. But the other things with situations that we were talking about changing so quickly is if you believe in Luther Burden, you're getting him at a value already. He is going late in these drafts, and he is a first-round NFL talent that fell a little bit, and the Bears jumped up and grabbed him with so many other probably more prominent needs because they already have this prolific offense, but they saw this guy up on the board, and they said they had to grab him, that he was more valuable than any of the other running backs left on the board. And that speaks volumes towards how they're going to use him in this organization. And when they start moving away from DJ Moore and Cole Kmet, you might see an amazing surgence from Luther Burden where he can be an incredible fantasy option.
Yeah, I think that, I just also believe more in the slot receivers because they just have a lot more manufactured touches, being
Yeah.
closer to the
More
quarterback, being
space to
over the
work with.
middle. And just based off seeing Caleb in his rookie year, loved targeting Keenan Allen in the slot. And so I just think
Definitely.
that when you have such a talented player like Burden that's going to be able to make plays, I just can't see how Caleb Williams is not going to fall in love with him as a player.
Yeah.
And that's to me where I am higher on Burden because I think that they're going to want to get the ball in his hands because crazy things are going to happen. Similar to how that happened with DJ Moore 2 years ago and how he was able to make so many plays after the catch. Like that is the quarterback's best friend when you can make an easy throw and they do the rest of the work for you by getting you all those yards. So
It was
I think
clearly a high priority for the Chicago Bears to replace Keenan Allen with a
mhm,
high valued asset. And
yep.
that's not really what Bears fans and NFL fans thought the Bears might do, but it's clearly what the Bears intended on doing.
Absolutely. And it'll definitely be fun to watch. But we hope that everybody enjoyed this episode of the Fantasy Brains podcast and enjoyed all of our analysis on these guys. Again, there's just so many different opinions that everybody has on these players. And to be honest, a lot of this stuff will change as soon as we start to see training camp and start to see how these depth charts start to work out. And even before week 1, we're really not going to know how everything is going to work out. But that is just the beauty of football. So, like I said, really hope that everybody enjoyed this episode. We're going to be coming out with one of these for the running backs in the draft and probably the tight ends as well. And also just coming out with a lot more draft content for the rest of these next couple months, along with our 32 team series, which is going to be coming out by mid to late May. We're going to be doing every single team in the NFL, doing about a 10 to 20 minute breakdown on all of them, how their lineups are going to work, how we kind of see the fantasy points being divided in those offenses. So definitely buckle up, get ready for those because it's going to be a lot of great content coming out this summer in order to, all of us to win our championships for the 2025-2026 season. So again, hopefully everybody enjoyed this episode. We'll see you next time, and we're out.
3, 2, 1.
Got a blast!
Thanks for checking out the Fantasy Brains. Don't miss next week's episode, Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern. See you next week, Brainiacs.